Morning. So we're up to Shin Lamed Vov Seif Yud Beis. We'll finish off this Siman and Hashem today. Says the Mechaber Te'enim sheyavshu be'ibeihen. So figs which have dried out on the stalks on the tree. V'chein ilon sheyavshu peiros by. And so too you've got a tree where the peiros have dried up. Hatolish be'hen b'Shabbos chayiv. Nonetheless you are still chayiv if you pick the fruit from them. Afal pi shehem ba'akurim, even though le'inyan tuma, they are considered uprooted. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Be'ibeihen, pirush bechiburim ba'anof. So they're still connected to the fruit, but yet they've dried up. V'chein ilon shir haloshen keino. This is really what the loshen is. V'chein hu hadin, says the Mishnah Berurah, kol ilon sheyavshu. Any tree that's dried out. V'lav dafka teina, lav dafka a fig tree. Of Nishmas Adam, Kalsov Shatos Soifahu. This the Mechaber is there's like a mistake in the text. But Tzarech Lema V'chein Ilon Sheyovish Uboy Peres. A tree that is dried out and there are fruit on it. Because originally we thought it means that the tree is still fresh and moist and the fruit have dried up. Even if the tree itself has dried up. It's still called mechuba, and therefore picking the fruit off this tree is still not allowed on Shabbos. Chayev. If we're talking about dried grass and vegetation, if it's all dried up, then it will be potter. When it comes to grass, there'll be even an isadrabonon. And sometimes, actually, it will be awesome in HaTorah. But Solim, the onions which have taken, their normal way is to take root in the leaves, which have got some dirt and offer in the leaves, and they've taken root in that dirt. And you want it to take root. If you pick those onions, then it's going to be chayiv. Even though the onion is fully exposed, and this is not the normal way of growing it. But if there's a whole pile of them, and they sort of take roots in that sort of fashion. Even if you didn't want them to take roots, then you'd be chayiv if you pick them as if they were planted properly in the field. That's the Magen Avraham Sif Kuf Yud Gimel b'Shem Shuvas Harosh Mishnah Perek Hey the Maestros Ein Shom Mishnah V'Ayin B'Shnois Eliyav. Okay, the Inyan Tuma. So in other words, the Mishnah said that the Mechaber said that if you pick ta'enim which have dried, or from the tree which has dried, then you're still chayiv, even though in that situation the Inyan Tuma is considered uprooted, it's considered akurim. Pirush, says the Mishnah Berurah Ches, Tumas Ochlin, i.e. in the case of Tumas Ochlin, it's not called it's not called mechuba v'zeh choshev katolish, but nevertheless in Hilchos Shabbos you would be chayiv. Okay, Yud Gimel. Now this is an interesting halacha where we're going to discuss usages of tree on Shabbos, and what about swings, what about hammocks and things like that. So this is actually quite a relevant halacha for Hilchos Shabbos. Also l'shtamish b'tzadei ha'ilon. You're not allowed to use the sides of a tree, but sidei tzadin mutar. But the sides of the sides is mutar. We'll see what this means. Lefichach. Also l'smecha sulam l'tzidei elon. You're not allowed to rest a ladder against the side of a tree. Because when you climb the ladder on Shabbos, you're using the tzodim of the tree. But if there is a peg which is knocked into the side of the tree, then you're allowed to rest the ladder on that, to have stodin, because the peg is stodin, v'sulam sidei stodin, and the sulam, the bladder, is sidei stodin. Sidei stodin is allowed. And if you put a peg in a tree and you hang a basket on that, hayesed nikran stodin. Again, the yesed, the peg is called stodin. V'kalkola katsidei stodin, and therefore the basket is on its sides, and therefore it will be allowed to use. Just general halacha, you're allowed to touch a tree on Shabbos, so long as you don't move the tree. That's the general rule. It's true for a car as well. You're allowed to touch a car on Shabbos, but you just can't move it. If it's a very light car and you can move it, then you can't do. Bar Amik, if you've got a very deep pit, even 100 amas, you're allowed to go down and up this pit. Matapis for yard, matapis for you can climb down and climb up. We're not worried you're going to be oike karka, which is problem of chirish in your descent and in your ascent. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nuntes. But sidei ha'elan, right? So you're not allowed to use the sides of a tree. Pirush. Dava hatochuv boy a kosher be'elan. It creates sidei ha'elan. Something which is tight, was sort of connected or banged in to the side of a tree. That's called stodei ha'elan. Avul dofnei ha'elan. But the side of the tree itself. That's just the side of a tree. That is the tree. That's not the sides. That's not sodin. Stodin means something which is pegged in or knocked into the tree. But sidei stodin hu dova hanishin bedova hatochav ilan, and sidei stodin, which is allowed, is something which is resting on the thing which is inserted into the tree. So also lismech sulam says Mishnah Berurah, ein haloshem meduktuk. The language is a little bit inaccurate. V'shir hadvarim. And the measure is this: the ein lismech sulam ha'ilon le'ilon be'erev Shabbos la'alos olav Shabbos. You're not allowed to put a ladder against the tree on erev Shabbos so that you can climb the ladder on Shabbos. The chisolik bay, because when you climb it, you're using the stodin of a tree because it's resting directly on the tree, and that's not allowed. However, v'lismech hasulam b'Shabbos vaday also. We're talking about putting this all in place before Shabbos, because resting a sulam, a ladder, against the tree on Shabbos itself is certainly also. Even if you don't rest it on the tree itself, you just rest it against the peg of the tree. Because you putting the ilon against the peg, if you would have done it before Shabbos, that's okay. But doing it on Shabbos, you're being mishtamish b'tzidei ilon on Shabbos, which is not allowed. Letzidei olim perish ledofne, the side of the tree. Okay, and Yud Samach base, Mishnah Berurah Samach base. What is this going on? Avalim yesh yesed to kua, but if you've got a peg which is inserted into the tree and you want to be somich something on that, that's allowed. Samach base says Mishnah Berurah, Dahainu demuta lismech sulam yerev Shabbos la'alos olav b'Shabbos mishum dahav yosed. So if you've got a peg inserted in a tree and then before Shabbos you put a ladder against that peg, you're allowed to climb the tree on Shabbos, or to climb the ladder on Shabbos because it's tidei sodin. But just careful not to touch the peg because that's tzidei ha'elam, which is not allowed. All you can do is climb on the rungs of the ladder. You can't touch the peg because that's stodin of a tree. I'll summarize in a second. And then so too, if you've got a peg which is knocked into the tree and you've got a basket hanging on that, that's sidei stodin, which is allowed. And therefore you're allowed to put peris into it, the little mimena, or take fruit out of the basket. But you can't actually take the basket, take it off or put it on. Like we said with the sulam, because that's just being mishtamish with the peg itself. You're using the peg on Shabbos. That's not allowed. What you can use is the basket to put things in and out of the basket, but you can't move the basket itself, because that is using the stodin, because you're using the peg. Now, if the basket is hanging on the branches of the tree itself, also little chayfetz mimena, then you can't take anything out of the basket, and so too not to put inside it, to come mishtamish b'stodin, because then you're just using the stodin directly, which is not allowed. If the entrance, the opening of the basket is quite narrow, and if you then put something in the basket, it's going to actually move the tree. Also, that is not allowed because you're using the tree directly. To rest on a tree. Now, this is going to be very counterintuitive. What if you're feeling tired or you're a chayla? Are you allowed to rest on a tree? Is there a difference between a chayla and a bari? So here, it's a bit counterintuitive. Im adam bari. If you're a healthy person, muta, that's allowed. V'tash keiche also, but someone who's weak, it's not allowed. Vatam, and the reason is the adam bari ain't a somech olav elamat, because a healthy person is not he's just resting on it a little bit. V'lo mikri mishtamish b'mechuba, and you're not being mishtamish properly b'mechuba, and therefore it's okay. Avol tashkech, for someone who's weak, tzorich lismech b'chol koichalov, he's got to sort of rest with his whole body on the tree, or mikri mishtamish b'mechuba also, and therefore you're being mishtamish b'mechuba, and therefore it's not allowed. V'hani mili kashe'ena menida. That's when you're not moving it. But if you do move the tree, then it's certainly not allowed. Afilu b'barios, even a healthy person, it will be also for him to do that. Because that is guf shimush, that is actually using the tree itself. So, back to our hammock and our swing. So imagine you've got a hammock, and my son, bless him, recently bought a hammock for use in the garden. We haven't got trees that can hold the hammock. That's besides the point. But that wasn't whatever. He says whatever. He's got there these side beams. So that's not a shine over here. But imagine you've got two trees. So just to put a hammock to hang it on the branches of the tree, that's not allowed because that's sidei stodim. That's stodim. And that's a problem. But if you put a peg into the tree on both sides, let's say, and you connect the hammock to the pegs, then no problem. You can swing on the hammocks, lie on it. That's okay because stodim is okay. Of course, you've done that before Shabbos, no problem. So to a swing, same sort of thing. If you've got a swing which is connected to a peg, that's sidei stodim, that would be allowed. But if the swing is actually just hanging from a branch of the tree, that would be a problem. Okay, and to actually put the hammock on the peg on Shabbos is a problem. It's always, we're talking about where it's there before Shabbos.
The tree is big enough.
Yeah. That's a technical problem. We're talking Hilchos Shabbos. And if it's not, he'll find out the hard way.
Even Shabbos,
I see. If the tree moves, If the tree moves, then you've got a problem. Yeah. We're talking about, I'm picturing these big sturdy trees. Okay.